Welcome to the OVCC webinar, Driving Business-to-Business Video Communications. Our speakers today are Andrew McFadden, OVC's President and Head of Global Marketing at Orange Business Services. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
And our second speaker today is Henry Dewing, and Henry's a Principal Analyst with Forrester Consulting. Welcome, Henry.
Good morning.
Thanks. Okay, and before Andrew starts us off today, I'd like to remind folks that you do have an opportunity to ask questions. We ask that you type in your question in the box, in the little dialog box that's shown on your screen, and then we'll consolidate the questions and answer them toward the end of the broadcast. Okay, so with that, let's get started. And Andrew, you're welcome to begin.
Okay, well, thanks very much indeed, Linda, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. Hopefully we have a webinar today that will be of great interest to you. The main purpose of it really is to share some key findings with you from a survey which we, the OVCC, recently commissioned, and we commissioned Forrester to do it for us. And we've been working with Henry and his team on the feedback, and as I say, today really the purpose is to share the key findings of that with you, which I think are very interesting. Before we get into that, though, I just want a short recap on OVCC, who we are and what we do. I guess many of you on the call today are members, so I won't spend too long on this. But I think it's worth just reiterating that, you know, we are an industry consortium. We say on here we're led by service providers. I like to think we're a team, and I think one of the strengths of OVCC is the fantastic working relationship that we have between all of the members, which number service providers, but also the key vendors in the market, and basically everybody that's a member of the video ecosystem. Certainly we have many of the largest service providers in the world. There are a few, probably more, that we will look to target to join as members in the coming months. And I think, you know, some of the learnings that we're getting out of the survey and the actions that we're planning to take as a consequence hopefully will encourage more service providers to join the ranks of the OVCC in the coming months. I think it's important to emphasize we're not a standards body. There are a lot of standards bodies in the market already. Really, the reason that we set up the OVCC was to work on the other kind of aspects around interconnection. So making sure that we have common operational interlocks and processes between the service providers. Looking at the commercial model that we should have in place between us. All of those things which, frankly, standards bodies don't work on. So, and I think, as I'll cover in the next couple of slides, we've made fantastic progress over the last couple of years. And as I say, given that you know, the members obviously are collaborating, but we're also competitors, so I think we have made some fantastic progress. So maybe the next slide, please. Okay, so you can see here, and I mean you can find this on our website, ovcc.net. These are the current members. So we have 30 members in total at the moment, and as you can see here, they fall into different categories. Again, don't worry too much about the categories. I think you know, be impressed by the names. As I say, we certainly have industry heavyweights as members of the OVCC. Next slide, please. So again, and I'll go through fairly quickly, but I think it is worth to reflect, and certainly those of you that are on the webinar that have participated in the work that has allowed us to get as far as we have, I thank you for your efforts. Certainly, you know, we started with what we would call the first wave of compliance services. So we had a number of network service providers. So we built a mesh, which was AT&T, Massagee, Bharti Airtel, and Orange Business Services, and then connected to that were the MSPs. And you know, those MSPs have now been offering what we call Release 1.0 compliance services, which was scheduled meet-me calls. You know, that was a good starting point, but clearly when we met and we set out our strategy for the future, it was clear to all that we needed to move on from that. And last year in 2013, one of the things that we did, we introduced a wholesale model. So there are a number of the MSPs now that are wholesaling services to what we called subscribing service providers. And I was very pleased recently that BCS Global, who is one of our MSPs, signed up Kathir in South Africa to become an SSP. So I think this really is a great way of expanding the customer base and the community of users for us as we move forward. We also announced the start of what we called Release 1.5, which includes ad hoc calling, and I think everybody believes that due to the complexity of scheduling meetings, and that's one of the things that Henry I think is going to talk quite a bit about in his section today. The complexity of scheduling calls, I think, it is such that maybe it has been a bit of a barrier to usage. So we're pretty excited now that as we move into a more ad hoc calling environment, that we'll see the level of interest and the level of traffic going across the network with compliance services increase. So far this year, and I think that again has been a significant contribution, is really the thought leadership papers that we're developing now as a result of the survey from Forrester. So as I say, that will be the main focus today. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we're working on, and again, I'd like to thank those of you that are on the bridge today that are working in some of these areas. And perhaps also encourage those of you that may be subject matter experts that aren't yet participating in some of the committees to kind of step forward and help. I think the strength of the OVCC is the collective knowledge and capability of its membership, and we need to really reach out and embrace as many people within the membership as possible to help us drive through some of these activities. So you can see here, these are some of the things that we're working on. A global dial plan, and we agreed at the Board of Directors meeting a couple of weeks ago that we'll now use a consistent global dial plan, which I think was a barrier for customers. Behind that, we're looking at directory. What form could or should a global directory have? I mean, again, if you're a user and you want to find out who else you can reach out to and have meetings with, you need some form of directory to achieve that. We're looking at a registry service. I mean, we've just in the process of launching our certification program. We've provisionally selected a test house. So that's an organization that will help both manufacturers but also service providers go to achieve certification. One of the things that the marketing team led by Christine Howley from Verizon is now working on is really to take the feedback that we're learning from the Forrester research survey and see how we can actually refocus our activities towards the end user to really help drive adoption and to answer some of the challenges that the end users seem to have in using video. Kind of linked to that is the next bullet, and again, we discussed this a bit at our last board meeting. I mean, it's clear that the world is changing, and that with Link and potentially WebEx and the session we're doing today, the use of video within a unified communications environment is increasing. And I think there is a significant role that the OVCC can play here, rather than purely looking at a video play, but to look at video as part of unified communication. And I think we agreed at the board that we would discuss this in our meeting in June. And I'm pretty excited because I think there is a significant role we can play. And finally, and kind of linked to that, we're now starting to work on the service definition of Release 2.0. So what should our OVCC compliance service look like in the future? So there's lots to be done. And again, I would strongly encourage as many of you as possible to participate in the various work groups and committees. So with that, now let's turn really to the main purpose of today, which is to really share the key findings of the survey. I mean, we carefully selected a partner to undertake this, and I think we unanimously decided that really Forrester was the company we wanted to work with, and certainly in Henry, we've got one of the world's leading analysts, I think, in the video communications field. So we were very excited with the project. We're excited by the findings. And with that, Henry, I'll turn over to you.
Andrew, thank you very much for that introduction. I thought I was having a hard time keeping my head in the video frame. I definitely will now. I just want to say the research has actually been very interesting and very engaging. The group has been very supportive, and I think we've got, frankly, some fascinating data that will help to drive everyone's understanding of how video gets used in the real world today. What we did for the project, as you're seeing on this slide, a very dense slide, but basically we talked to about 700 users, IT decision makers, and business decision makers across a variety of different businesses. We asked them about the current utilization of video as well as those things that are driving and inhibiting usage. We delved a little bit into use cases by role and by industry to find out when and where people were or were willing to use video today. At the end of the day, I think, like I said, we got some interesting information. So let's move straight into the data. There we go. Yep. We'll start out with the geographic and industry opportunities. The last slide was just basically saying, we need to make sure who we're listening to. Users and buyers don't always agree. But when we talk about geographies and industries, we do see some hotspots. On the first data slide, we're going to see some information. The orange bars are the APAC region, and we see APAC consistently reporting that their organization has more interest in utilizing video communications than many of the other geographies. All of them are interested at some level. The lowest interest we're seeing, for just a generic presentation, communication, collaboration, at 25, 30, 40% from Europe and North America, up to when we talk about education or locating a subject matter expert. When we talk about supporting the logistics process or issue resolution, over 50% of the respondents were saying their organization was interested in utilizing video. So a tremendous amount of interest there. On a recent panel discussion I did with OVCC, we talked about this APAC interest, and it did line up with the experience of some folks who were in region. Other people said, that's interesting, but what really drives the need for video is the need to drive business results. So I think we need to look beyond simple geography to find areas and ways to encourage adoption. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about the actual industries as well as the business benefits that people are achieving with their video communications. We still do see, IT decision makers saying, 72% of the time they're just using travel savings to justify their investment. Another 69% are using employee productivity to evaluate the value of these deployments. So those are the big numbers right at the top. But as we look down the row, we see process time reductions, a strategic initiative, improving customer satisfaction, improved innovation, real business results that are driving this. And the check marks you see off on the right, when we look at professional services and process time reductions, that was a significantly higher interest point. So there are processes and interest there. We look a little bit lower down on the slide, you're seeing the manufacturing area, looking at things where we've got strategic initiatives are actually generating revenue. So using video to generate revenue. So there are definitely geographic and business initiatives.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. I mean, and perhaps actually my first bullet isn't terribly well formulated in view of your comment, but I think when we first analysed this within the marketing committee and then the board of directors, I guess it's fair to say we were sort of surprised, maybe pleasantly surprised about the great interest in the Asia-Pac region. I suppose it's characterised by the fact that it's a very big region with many different countries, but certainly I think it's a great opportunity for us in OVCC. I mean, we do have some members in that region today, but I think increasingly, based on your feedback, we should actively promote ourselves in that region. I think the other kind of observation I'd make, and again, I think that'll be some of the work that Christine and the marketing committee are now looking at, is really, given the last slide that we saw about where people are really keen and see the added value of using video, is to really try and develop some use cases which we could share with the market and with our customers to really explain in some detail of where we see using video for some of these applications and business processes across different industry sectors could bring benefit to the customers. So again, I think it's really good news.
Great point, and logically leads us to the next section. Let's talk about the information workers and how they adopt and how they use video. So as we jump into this data, one of the things we asked right off the bat is, what features would make you want to use video? And the answers here are those that reply to it's either critical or a must-have or an important feature. And what we see is this desire for really close support. It has to be reliable. It has to be supported by IT. It has to be simple and easy to use. Those are the top three answers overall. We do see some differences based on what organization that they work in. Notably, if you look at it supported by IT staff, engineering, research, and design are less worried about that. That highly technical staff in those areas can kind of support themselves. You would think that the IT organization would have been even lower in that number, but they even wanted some support from IT more so than the research and development guys. So as we look down this list, I think what we see is really a laundry list of things of varying levels of interest. The ability to use from my laptop, high quality video. As we get down to the very bottom, the ability to see and connect to people at other companies is kind of the lowest must-have feature, because I think my hypothesis here is in taking the survey, people said, well, that's what video is, so yeah, I'm assuming I got that. What do I need to make me able to adopt and use that particular service? So if these are things that information workers must have, where do they actually use the video? We see a great number of people are using them on these personal systems, on their laptop, on their desktop PC, or in a room-based system on a tablet comes in next. So people are using video in the context of their daily work life, in the middle of a business process, with that business tool which they use on a daily basis, the laptop, the desktop PC. Tablet becoming more important, smartphone, the IT organization outweighs almost everybody in their utilization of that smartphone. I think this gets back to the point from the previous slide where we talked about the technical capability of those folks. We don't, however, see the engineering, research, and development right behind that. My hypothesis there is R&D, when they actually need to talk to somebody, they need to see their face, and they probably need to share some information. If you're doing real innovation, you're probably sharing some detailed plans or detailed information that's driving that research and development, and that's really, frankly, hard to do on a smartphone. So this notion that we talked about earlier about in context, in process, your location and your device is part of that process, and we need to make sure we're aware of that. The call out over on the right, a lot of times in video, many people use generation as a shorthand. Oh, it's the millennials, the Gen Y workers, it's the YouTube generation, if you will, who we really need to worry about with video. And although that is generally true, and it does work, like I said, as a shorthand, it's not always true. But reinforcing, unfortunately, the stereotype, we've got 33% of Gen Y workers, higher than any process or role cohort. 33% of Gen Y workers are using their smartphone. So you do see generational differences, no doubt, but that doesn't mean that 100% of Gen Y workers are going to use their smartphone to do video. And that's my point: is don't overtake the stereotype. Who do people talk to? We've talked to.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, Andrew, please jump in.
Yeah, maybe if I could ask you a question, maybe just if you could just go back one slide, please, for sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, clearly, and this is obviously what we asked you to do. Clearly, this was a sort of snapshot as to when you did the survey, and it's interesting that there's significantly more using laptops, etc. And I mean, that was obviously the situation in in November, December when we made the survey. But, if you look out a year, 18 months, 2 years from now, would you see this dramatically changing more in, in favor of tablets, smartphones, etc.?
I think absolutely. We don't talk much about it here, but inside Forrester's kind of subscription-based data research capabilities, we look at what we call the anytime, anywhere worker. In the past 2 or 3 years, the utilization of smartphones and tablets has more than doubled. The desire, ability, and actual actions of those information workers to bring their own device, to pay for their own services, to use their own web services and capabilities has grown by almost 3 times. So I think we're definitely going to see these types of devices, the tablets, the smartphones, continue to increase in importance. And at the end of the day, when we talk about devices, those personal devices are a bit of the foundation of what I see as a pyramid of video endpoints. Lots of personal devices allow them to connect into more dedicated room-based type solutions, enabling communications to flow more freely and more clearly through the organization.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, sorry, because we're going a bit off script here, but I think it was interesting. I noticed that Enterprise Connect last week, there were some announcements about new room-based systems. So, I think some people had a view that the room system market had plateaued, but I guess, we'll probably, I would hope anyway, that we'll see a growth again in that area.
Yep, and that's what you pointed to exactly. The laptop, the smartphone builds the foundation so that the pyramid can get taller, and that pyramid is made of room systems and dedicated kind of telepresence type solutions at the very, very high end.
Yep, thanks.
So this is where we're using it. The next slide, as we started on, talks about who people actually connect to and communicate with when they are in a video session. And what we see is a lot of people who are talking inside the company. They're talking to their peers. 90% of people who use video are using it to connect to their peers. 60% with their boss, 24% with subordinates. We only see about 31% with customers, 22% with partners, 17% with vendors, on down the line. So what we see is the vast majority of people who are using video are using it internally inside their company, and this utilization outside the company is somewhat nascent at this point of the game. As you heard Andrew talk about at the beginning of the webinar, this is one of the objectives, goals, missions of the OVCC, is to make it more standard, more simple, and frankly more useful to have intercompany open video communications. So this slide really, I think, lays out very clearly the challenge for OVCC. And as we move through this, we'll ask information workers more about why they use video when they do and what keeps them from working. So let's keep moving forward. So we asked people, how often do the following things keep you from using video? I believe that other meeting participants prefer visual anonymity. And when we talked about the definition of visual anonymity in the survey, we talked about some people just don't like being seen on video. When they put on their headset, their hair stands up. I think we're seeing a great example of that today, unfortunately. I apologize. Some
I
people.
don't have that problem.
Well, it's not 100%. Some people, they want to be able to do email while they're on a meeting if it's part of the meeting that's not part of their particular shtick. So, that visual anonymity, some people want it for the other meeting participants so that they'll come to the meeting. Some people want it for themselves. They worry that people don't have the capability or the ability to utilize the video. So how many people have spent 10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting? How do you log into this tool? How do you use that tool? That type of thing wastes a lot of time, and particularly with external communications. If you're a salesman talking to a customer, you don't want to spend 10 minutes fumbling with, control what. You want to get to the meat of what your product can do for that customer. So we do see really kind of two different patterns here. And one is technical issues. I don't know how to use it. I don't think it's reliable. I don't think it's high enough quality. And personal. I don't like to be on video. I don't think people I work with like to be on video. I don't get it, I don't understand the value. So both of these keep information workers from using video, and both of them need to be addressed over time as open video communications gets put into use. So if these are reasons why people don't use video, the next slide, hopefully I've got my talking points right. If it were easier to use, we've got 70, 80% of people saying they use it for all types of meetings. We tried to test against a variety of meetings from brainstorming all the way down to plain old status reporting, and we got 60, 70, 80% of people saying if this video solution were simply easier to use, I'd either be very likely or likely to use it for all types of meetings. And the interesting thing here is when we asked those information workers, does video make you more productive? Of those who had used video, which was about 70% of the information worker sample, 73% said, if I used it, it made me more productive. Those who have not used video, only about 40% said, gosh, I've never used it, but I think it would make me more productive, which means simply by using it, there's fully a third of that employee base that will be converted to believers. That's probably too strong of a phrase, but there's a third of people that once they use it, they see the value, and they don't see it before they use it. That's quite clear from the data we're getting back on this particular study. And we see it across not just video, but across all the other tools. The same thing for every other tool that can be used along with video communications, document cameras, screen sharings, remote whiteboards, even things like holographic images and voice control. People who had used it are on the left, and we've got some relatively small ends on things like holographic images. People who had not used it were on the right. So if you've used it, you believe these things will make you more productive. You see very high numbers, 80, 90, 100%. If you haven't used it, generally speaking, it's somewhat lower. Screen sharing, people still understand, but things like social networking, people just don't get it. If they haven't used it in connection with video, they don't get it. So I think there's a real message here to the information workers around the world and to the vendors that are then trying to sell these solutions. Try it. You'll like it. Once you've tried it, you begin to figure out how to use video in new and different ways across your business. But ultimately, it's up to the vendors to demonstrate to information workers why they should try it the first time. That's the big hurdle to get over in this situation.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. I mean, just a couple of observations, and I'm sure there's a few more. I mean, you talked about video anonymity, and well, actually, I'm not anonymous today because I'm on here by video. So I ought to point out that this isn't a gin and tonic that I'm drinking, despite the fact that it's late in the afternoon. It is in fact a glass of water. But so we talked here, and it was interesting. This situation that people seem to be kind of confident to use video internally, but much less so externally. And it seems as though it's because of this kind of low-risk communication where, okay, if you're on an internal call and there's an issue with the quality, then pretty much the person kind of explained away. I think for us, and this is one of the things that we discussed a couple of weeks ago in the marketing committee. I think clearly what we need to do as service providers, as vendors, etc., is really to come up with a way to make people feel a lot more comfortable that external calls, particularly using OVCC compliant service, which is effectively an on-net service with security and reliability and quality of service behind it, isn't going to cause risk for them. And in fact, actually, Clive Sawkins from BCS Global, when we were talking about this, I think he coined a very apt phrase, which is that people should really use OVCC compliant service when it really matters. And I think if you look at business-to-business meetings, those really matter. So do internal meetings. But I think it's really incumbent on us to make it easier, and so to decrease the complexity of setting up calls. In some of those graphs, although we went through them fairly quickly, there was I need to know who I can contact. So again, what we're looking at is this question of directory and dial plan. So a lot of the actions and activities which we've really set out in our OVCC roadmap, I think, do already go some way to address some of these findings that we've come across. As I say, I think there is a lot of work to do. There are some fairly, I would say, quick wins. For example, we have a situation which we discussed where we have customers today who would like to see a demonstration. So potentially a customer in a Cisco room connected to the Orange network wants a demonstration call to a Polycom room on the BT network. Frankly, today, that's not terribly easy to organize. It should be, but we've not really put much focus on how to make it happen. And I think, what we have agreed is that this is an area, as I say, I would classify as a quick win, where I think by simplifying the process to set up demo meetings and demo calls, we can really help our sales forces to show customers that that it isn't complicated and that the quality is really very good. And I mentioned before this question of using use cases. I think again, it's very powerful, certainly if you're in sales, to be able to point to specific customer testimonies on how it's improved their business, how it's improved the efficiency of their business process by using video in a B2B mode. So again, I think we're learning a lot from this study. Some of it, we guessed already. It's fairly intuitive, but I think certainly it's very good to have it in such clarity. So maybe back to you, Henry.
Yep, and I think definitely want to emphasize what Andrew just said. This notion of usability, interoperability, and use cases is key to the information worker adoption. I kind of alluded to the fact we've got kind of human factors as well as technical factors that affect people's willingness to use. Those two do bleed together when you get an information worker who says something like, oh, I remember 8 years ago we had this video solution. Couldn't really see the person on the other end. It took us 10 minutes to start it up. That's just not something that's going to help me out. So being able to go to that information worker and talk about the realities of today's video market, reliable IP-based network, intuitive user interfaces, demonstrated interoperability is a key thing. Demonstrating an inter-vendor, inter-company, inter-network call goes a long way towards overcoming some of this inertia of built-up resistance to video, which is founded, quite frankly, in experience. Information workers have seen things not work in the past, and it makes them scared. They need to be shown that it works. And the way to show it, quite frankly, is with use cases that fit into their role, into their industry. You go to a hospital and you talk about the ability of doctors to more effectively diagnose patients by using video when they're on something like Grand Rounds so that they can actually see more patients more rapidly that fit their specialty. A manufacturing company that can use video to diagnose manufacturing issues, out-of-tolerance issues on the manufacturing line. A salesperson that can demonstrate their product. And that's something we did here in the course of this survey is the ability to explain something using visual cues on video was kind of the #1 use case. That's what people really wanted to do. When you ask them, does it allow you to just make clearer communication, that was interesting. You get 30, 40-something% of folks who said, yeah, that's a reason to use video. When you said I can explain something using visual cues, it was some 70%. So this very personal usage, exactly what Andrew was saying. So sorry about that, and not following the script at all today. That's no good. So let's move forward. Let's talk about one of the interesting things we saw in the picture you saw up front in this presentation is information workers do one thing, IT decision makers think another, and those differences in opinion about video often drive some misunderstandings. Now, we asked all 3 cohorts, what would make video communications more usable? Improved reliability, security, ease of use. Those were things that were important across the board. But when we pick below the surface here, what we're seeing is, improved security is most important, in fact, only important to the IT cohort. When we talk about improved usability, we're seeing the information worker definitely talking about that. The business decision maker and the information worker worried about usability, reliability being even more so with the information worker. So some similarities in what we're asking for, but also some incredible differences, right? You know, look at information workers. 54% want an instant-on functionality. These are the people who have lived through that 10-minute meeting startup way too many times. So unless somebody tells them it comes on instantly, they don't even want to get involved. But the IT decision maker, you only got 29%. They don't think it's a problem because, hey, if it works, eventually it's good enough. And that's not the case when you talk to the information worker. So being able to cross these divides between what buyers think, what system owners think, what the business decision makers believe will be the value, and what information workers are willing to do are not always the same thing. So user experience and reliability are kind of at the top for everybody, but we do see some differences as we dig down below that. When we talk about the technical ability, we actually asked information workers, do you know how to provide an address so that others can connect to you using video communications? And so when we asked them this question, we heard pretty overwhelmingly that information workers really and truly do not know how to provide this external address. They don't know how even to provide the address internally, which means if there's not a good address book internally, many of them can't connect. So this is, I think, is a real problem in this global address book that Andrew talked about as a current initiative up front, I think, or a what was the actual phrase you used, a kind of standard addressing paradigm? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I think is a critical thing to address this information worker need. And what I think is interesting here, and what we're calling on this slide, is only about 1/3 of IT report that external addressing is a significant impediment, and yet we're seeing 80% of people saying they can't ever give an external address. So once again, clearly a difference. These two groups are not seeing eye to eye, as they say. Today, we see a tremendous amount of video communication being internal. We talked earlier about 90% of people talking with their peers, and then with their subordinates, and then with their boss. So that communication is internal, and it's generally scheduled. Now, when we talk about scheduled communication, we need to be careful. The notion that you have to schedule hardware, so a video communications port, a transcoder, something like that, when you have to go into your electronic calendar and schedule a resource for a meeting, that's a definite impediment to meetings. When you have to schedule people's time, that unfortunately is a reality of the business world. If I call Andrew at the end of my business day, I'm not going to get him, and that's because he's in a time zone that's 6 hours ahead of me. I need to schedule those calls. I need to think about when they're going to happen. Human communications is generally scheduled. Video is an important type of communication, so we'll see some scheduling, but this is preponderance. 80% of information workers say that their calls are scheduled, and that's just a little bit too many. Excuse me, 3/4 say they're scheduled. 80% are internal. So what we're looking for is ways to expand that utilization of video to outside of the company to allow it to happen in an ad hoc fashion across networks, across companies. The other thing we see, you hear a lot of people saying, video just doesn't work. One of the things that I've heard consistently in some of the inquiries that I take at Forrester and at many of the OVCC members here is that businesses are blocking video. So this started 4 or 5 years ago. You'd hear IT managers call in and say, how do I block this YouTube thing at the firewall? It's swamping my network. It's killing me. And my immediate answer was always, well, what is that YouTube for? If it's, your workers watching funny cat videos, yeah, absolutely, let's stop that. If, however, it's your salespeople doing competitive research on what your competitors are posting and how they're selling their solution, then it's actually a valuable valuable business usage. So you need to think more carefully about that. So this led to the question of, how often does IT actually block video at the firewall, and how does that impact the utilization of video? So IT reports that some 80% of the time they're doing some level of blocking, whether it's blocking all video, blacklisting, whitelisting. They think that they're actually controlling the flow of video, and yet 90% of information workers say, yeah, no problem. I just use the corporate network when I need to have video communications. Now, either it's a very small group who's only using corporate sanctioned systems, or it's people that are using video on a mobile device and they think they're hooked up to the corporate Wi-Fi, but they're actually going over the public network. And there's any number of ways to explain this. What is remarkable, though, is the absolute dichotomy of 90% of information workers think and want to use the corporate network, and 80% of IT administrators think and are trying to block utilization on the corporate network at some level. So once again, not seeing eye to eye on the utilization and having to work through this so that there's one single, consistent, reliable way to utilize video for communications at work. When we ask people, what processes they use, once again, we see general agreement in the importance of the processes across the cohorts, but a little bit of difference between which group believes which process is most important. I think the consistency is the key message here. Things like issue resolution and response management, things like reaching a subject matter expert and providing education to others, things like logistics processes and healthcare processes are ones that are most helped by video, things that people are most interested in taking a look at and utilizing inside their business. When you put in front of any group this notion that 60% of human communication is nonverbal, so you'll have clearer communication, you'll have better collaboration, these kind of generic phrases that many of us have used in talking about video over the years, it's less interesting. Still, a quarter, a third, a half say, yeah, that's interesting, it would drive interest in utilizing video, but nothing compared to being able to use video to resolve issues faster or to educate employees better. So definitely, once again, looking at these use cases, reinforcing that message that we had already provided last time.
Yeah, so thanks very much indeed, Henry. I mean, as you can all see, I mean, there's a lot of data here, and clearly we've gone through it fairly quickly. What I would say is behind the slides that you've seen today, there is actually significantly more data. I mean, it was a very extensive survey that Forrester undertook on our behalf, and again, certainly for the OVCC members, the data is being and will be made available to you. But again, as I mentioned earlier in the call, I would really encourage those of you that are interested to delve into it more, but also really help extract the lessons from it and help us really shape the roadmap and the activities of the OVCC in the coming weeks, months, and years. I would strongly encourage you to participate in particularly in the marketing committee in the first stage, really to help us understand what programs we can develop and drive, but then also in the operations groups and the technical committees, which is where really they're translating these marketing requirements into reality. And I think it's clear that we need to find ways to make to reduce the complexity, to make it easier for customers to use business to business, whether it's within one service provider's network or across service providers' networks. And I think areas, as we said, about the dial plan registry, as we move to using virtual meeting rooms that we can access across service provider networks, all of these things really will help us to decomplexify, if there's such a word, the setting up of video. I think one of the interesting things that Henry uncovered is this kind of, I use the word conflict, but it seems that within many of the organisations we talk to, the people really that would be interested to use video are a little bit discouraged by the IT organisation. Now, quite why that is, I think we can discuss further. But I think clearly a target for us as service providers, and maybe through the OVCC, is really to find a way to directly talk to message the IT decision makers, to really show that by promoting it within their companies and organizations, it's not going to cause a nightmare for them. I guess that's really what it's about. And, you know, again, as I say, I think one of the ways that we can do that is this promotion of use cases. We say here across different industry sectors, but I also think that, you know, within certain verticals, you know, we talked about healthcare, I think in Henry's analysis, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity for, you know, intercompany video within the health sector, for example. So, you know, although in some ways some of the results from the survey, you know, showed that we've got a long way to go, I think it's very encouraging that, you know, if we can fix some of these issues, and I think there are, you know, quite a few of them that are not too difficult to fix, then there is pent-up demand for business-to-business services. Okay, so maybe the next slide. Yeah, so I think, I mean, at that point, I think Linda said at the start, you know, we could have some time to take questions, so I think we've probably got about 15 minutes left of our allocated time, so if there are any questions, perhaps Linda, you could pass it forward.
Yes, we did have one question at the very beginning, and I believe that would be for Henry. Someone had asked, do the results from your slide 1 include real-time video communication or video on demand type? Is that also included?
So the entire study was around real-time two-way video communications, whether it was point-to-point video calling or multi-point video conferencing. We actually were fairly careful to ask questions about video calling, video conferencing, and then video collaboration where you're using these other tools. What we found very consistently through the study is the response and the interest across all 3 cohorts, buyers, decision makers, and users, was very similar. So we collapsed those into just video communications on almost all the slides. However, there is nuance under the surface to all of that data, which is, Andrew said, if you're an OVCC member, all that data is available to you to delve into, and there is a great deal of it behind, like, for instance, the slides where we talk about what processes, and we talk about education and access to subject matter experts, or we talk about logistics. There are actually a series of questions, some targeted by industry, some targeted by role, that were accumulated up into those groupings to look at how people would react to an easier video experience. So great deal of data behind the covers. All of it was aimed at live two-way video, and most of the questions, in fact, were delving into what it takes to enable inter-company video versus intra-company video, so that we could understand better what those the needs for addressing and network interop and vendor interop were.
Okay, great. We don't have, that was the only question that was came in through the system. Oh, hold on just a minute.
Linda, sorry, maybe it's not so much. I was going to say it is a question, but in terms of today's slide deck, I assume that probably quite a few of the people that have joined the webinar would be interested to receive the slides. Are we making provision for that?
Yes, we are. Actually, we taped the session today, Andrew, and it will be up on the website probably in the next couple of days. And I'll send out I can send out a notification to everyone who attended and those who also had originally registered. I do have one other question just came in. It said, what type of companies do you see using video to sell their service/equipment? Andrew, is that something you want to take?
I was thinking that you were aiming that towards Henry. I don't know.
Okay.
That I will say, so that sales call, you know, we did hit on this when we talked about low-risk communications. That sales call is a high-risk communication. A salesman calling a customer to talk about a product generates a lot of hesitation. What we do see is in businesses where the product, think professional services, where you know, CEOs have said for years our most important assets go up and down the elevator every day. They're beginning to say our most important assets are appearing on a video screen near you today. That's definitely one area. Another area is something like textiles, where the actual appearance of the product is critical. You know, what the colors, what the look and feel of the product is. Those are something we're also seeing video, and that was something that just plain wasn't possible before high-definition video became a norm in the video conferencing space, right? A Forrester connection, or Forrester codec on a best efforts connection didn't deliver a reliable way to use those visual cues to explain your product. So those are the things where it's becoming critical, where a human conversation, something like professional services, demonstrating a proof of capabilities, or something like the textile industry, where the actual appearance and the visual appearance of that product is actually what people are buying, become critically important.
Okay, I have another question that just came in. It says, do you see video growing in the retail industry, and how?
So within the retail industry, there's been a utilization of archive video for some time. We saw, a few years back, there was a big uptick in high-tech retail, where when there were product details that were beyond the capability of the minimum wage fellow on the floor of Best Buy to explain, there were ways to reach back into either an archive on-site or even connect through to a provider. One of the examples that I remember most clearly at that point of the game was in selling an HD TV, the notion of how you set that TV up, how you use it, but more importantly, connecting back through to your cable TV service provider. Is HD service available in your area, and how do you sign up for that? Those kind of connections were being made, oftentimes over video, to talk about how to use the product, and then reverting to an audio connection to get into the contact center at that service provider. So those areas are definitely happening. There was a high-end department store in Asia Pacific that was putting that wasn't video. They were selling the $500 jeans, and when the jeans didn't quite fit right, you could use a IP device in the dressing room to alert the sales clerk. I think you could get video into the dressing room but not out of, which is, I think, wholly appropriate in that situation. So there's a lot of different use cases, some of them directly involving the customer, some enabling the ecosystem to be more successful. We're seeing a lot of UC, quite frankly, in retail, in order to help sales clerks locate equipment in order to answer deeper questions, things like that. So when those questions are better answered with a visual cue, you will see video play a role.
Great. Okay, that's all the questions I see at this time.
Okay.
So I guess
I was going to say, maybe Linda, if I can close the call. So I mean, I'd like to really thank Henry. Not only for today, I think he's given a first-class presentation, but also for the great work that Forrester did on this. I mean, it really was a collaborative effort between him and the OVCC, and so thanks for that. Thank you all for dialing in. I hope you found it useful, and again, at the risk of repeating myself too many times, I really do encourage those of you that are OVCC members to participate with us, to help us shape the future of this, and to really start to drive more business for B2B video, because I think it really is a nascent market where there's a lot of opportunity. And finally, I'd like to thank Linda and the team for all of their work in setting up the webinar. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Yep, and Andrew, I can't let you thank me that profusely without passing some of that down. The Forrester team behind me with the expertise and survey and statistical analysis, particularly Justin Watts. It sounds like I'm on the Oscar stage now, who program managed and helped me put together these presentations and forced me to practice what I was going to say a little bit more than I might have done by myself. So the Forrester team stood behind this. It was not just me.
Very true. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate you attending today.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.